So if someone says they know God, but they believe the Earth is a globe, do they have the wrong God?
No, they have the wrong uh, Earth shape in their brains.
I have a flat brain.
That's probably why you think it's a globe.
Prove me wrong.
What, that
No,
your
I
brain's
believe
flat?
you. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. It seems could be the case.
Dang, I'm hilarious this morning.
Hmm. I don't know.
This flat Earth channel is like the new. It became popular and became like the new veganism channel. Y'all like dominating out here on this Discord. I noticed.
Yeah, man.
Y'all recruiter steps must be working. Maybe y'all got the truth, huh? Maybe people are hearing the truth.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. We do have a lot of empirical evidence, and it's very hard to argue against this. I mean, most people just believe that the Earth's a globe, and that's it. And they never really questioned it. They never tested it. They don't really know that much about it in general, and they also don't really know the flat Earth arguments either. So, but they think flat earthers are all stupid, so they come in here, full of confidence, and then pretty quickly they kind of realize all of those things that I just mentioned.
Like I understand, like some things are more important to other people for sure. Like I get that, but I ask myself like, how would how would I maybe react, or how would my life be impacted? Maybe this is just me personally. I don't speak for others, but if someone comes on the TV and tells me the Earth is round, I'm like, okay. And then if someone come on the TV and tells me the Earth is, flat, I would just be like, okay. I mean, I get it that there's like a perspective of being lied to by your government and society and scientists and whatnot. But frankly, if there was an announcement that the Earth was, a scientist made a new discovery that the Earth is in fact flat. I don't know. It doesn't help me with sadness or loneliness or to be closer to God. You know, I mean, I guess it could help be closer to God because there is a certain maybe explanation of a particular shape of an Earth that's not a globe in the Bible, from what I understand. So it really doesn't like help with. This is just me personally, again, not speaking generally, right? But there's certain lost young men in this life and women and a certain detriment to being alive these days, isn't there? A certain darkness to being alive in the world these days, and just witnessing that which goes on around. And it just feels like that kind of result would really not impact the detriment, I don't know. You guys know what I mean at all? I don't know. This life just seems to becoming a bit more sad, I think, as technology advances. Does that make sense at all? And
I agree with that sentiment. We just have to maybe realise whether it's by accident, like our natural progress, or whether it's by design.
it's just unfortunate that through the lies and the truth that this life feeds us, it just seems that the sadness and the depravity just stays constant, unfortunately. It increases even. I don't know. I tell you, my
Yeah,
heart is certainly shaped as a globe, or like an egg, right? But Certainly feels
Yeah,
broken though,
like a
in this
blob.
life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly
a
feels
blob.
broken without like a kind of a without like relief of healing, I don't know. Maybe I need to allow the touch of a woman back into my life and I wouldn't be so analytical, like self-analytical, right? Like overthinker, I guess.
In regards to what you were saying before about what would it change, well, nothing would change in the sense that you already live your life as if, I mean, you already experienced the Earth as flat anyway. Right, even if it's a globe, they tell you that it's, you're so small and it's so big, you just experience it as flat and
Mm,
motionless. So
mm,
nothing in that sense would change, but what changes is it's different for each person, but it really changes your worldview. It changes the way that you spend your time. It changes the way you do your research. It changes the way you think in general. And that leads, when you're doing different types of research and that kind of thing, it leads you down other rabbit holes. And for me, it's been extremely positive. Um, yeah, it's hard to explain because it's different for each individual person, but a lot of flat earthers generally will never ever be bored again in their life. That's one thing that most flat earthers will mention, right? This like opens up all of these new rabbit holes, if you want to call them that. So I don't ever get bored. There's I wish there was 1,000 hours every single day, right? So I could keep researching all of these things. It's fascinating stuff. Um, but yeah, I guess it depends on each individual situation.
yeah, I understand what you're saying, for sure.
It really unlocks your critical thinking skills. That's why a lot of people will refer to it as like, when did you wake up? Like it does. It really feels like you kind of snap out of like some kind of hypnosis. Or I'm not saying you're hypnotized. That's just kind of what it feels like. That's the general word people use for that feeling of when you discovered that what we get told isn't quite correct. And it really does feel like you're like, damn, I can't believe I can't believe I was like all of these different things that I was just hook, line, and sinker in. I never really thought critically as I should have been earlier in my life. But yeah, definitely boosts critical thinking.
Well, then we'll have like, if the Earth was discovered to be flat, we would just have like the only thing I would notice in my life changing probably would be like we would have a Discord channel called 24/7 around Earth Discord. I wonder I wonder how. And I know that people who study flat Earth understanding like hear that statement all the time like, well, what would make the difference of learning about the Earth is round or flat? Who cares what the result of the answer is? But I know that there's a certain an honesty and a truth that needs to be lived by, and to understand our surroundings truthfully without, wavering. Obviously, living in a lie or living in a being lied to is not conducive with an honest reality. I get that, but if I think about ideally how my life, just as a person who hasn't really contemplated the matter of fact of being lied to or not about the shape of the Earth, I guess really, I would just notice that probably the name of this Discord channel would change from Flat Earth Discord to Round Earth Discord, wouldn't it? Then we'd have people, naysayers, arguing that the Earth is a globe all the time, wouldn't we? I mean, not naysayers, but people who contemplate with others and about the facts of the shape of the Earth, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go as far to say that we're being lied to. Uh, in most cases, I think most like I couldn't prove one single person if you asked me to write a list of who's lying about the shape of the Earth. I wouldn't be able to put a single name on a list and prove that that name knows that the Earth is flat and is actively lying about it being a globe. I think the globe is more like a tradition. It's something that has been passed down generation to generation through textbooks, through movies, that kind of thing,
Well,
for the
NASA
last
will go to the
five or six
grave,
hundred
right?
years.
Like NASA will go to the grave, right? Before they would admit that the Earth is shaped something different from what they've projected upon
Oh
with their
yeah.
results or something, right?
Well, I mean, they would have to rewrite history. They would have to rewrite every education system, the textbooks. I mean, huge whole fields would be out of work. Governments that already aren't trusted would crumble because this would be the biggest thing, right? If they've been lying about this, what else are they lying about? People would work out that, oh, okay, they're also lying about history. And I mean, a lot of people already know that they lie, especially about history and all sorts of different things. But yeah, this is a huge thing. I think that if everyone just magically, like hypothetically, woke up to the Earth being flat tomorrow, I think the governments would crumble. The education systems would have to be rewritten, and yeah, it would be extremely interesting.
That's interesting. You would see like a severe, like a down dip in the. You would see like you said a degradation in society, and like you would see like almost like a certain level of anarchy? No, right? It wouldn't create like havoc in any way, right? But you see that there would be a massive shift if that knowledge was revealed to be true in society and what in the world. I have a hard time imagining that. I see the average human just being like, well, okay, whatever they tell us, right? I mean,
Well, check this out. What's interesting is that they did a whole bunch of surveys back in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 in all these different countries. And back then, most countries would come in about 1 in 10 people is a flat earther, depending on the country, right? Like France was 1 in 10, Romania was 1 in 10, uh, Brazil was 7%, I think Italy was 5%, uh, I think it was Sweden. I think Sweden was 3%, and then you had America was 11%. And anyway, they started redoing those surveys again, and Brazil went from 7%, and now in the latest survey in 2026, now it's 22%. So, I'd like to see the one done on America because it's much more popular in America than it is in Brazil. So I think the numbers are going up like crazy, and also what happened back in 2015, 2016, Flat Earth blew up on the internet. It started going viral, and Flat Earth videos were getting millions of views. It actually became the number one most popular search term on YouTube. Even during the Trump election, it overtook Donald Trump, and Congress actually got together with the owners of Google and YouTube and that kind of thing, and they basically had a Congress meeting, and they decided that they're going to censor Flat Earth from that point onward. And basically, what they did was they completely shadow banned the topic. And yeah, if you have a look at the charts, right, in the analytics, it just bombs at the end of 2016. And since then, like, and what they did was they made it so if you typed in the name of a flat Earth video, it wouldn't come up basically. And instead of that video coming up, it would come up with a playlist of propaganda which is basically mocking and ridiculing flat earthers, right? It would come up with the dumbest, straw man arguments and the stereotypical tinfoil hat type videos or debunking videos. And that just changed basically this year. Right, so that shadow ban is kind of coming to an end, and now all of a sudden, flat Earth content is going viral again on platforms like X, TikTok, Instagram, and now YouTube's had to jump on board with that again now. And basically, like now, if you type in the name of a flat Earth video, it actually comes up. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years because it's actually getting out there again now. It's not being suppressed as much as it was. And now most people that you talk to have heard about it. Most people have, a lot of people you wouldn't think, you talk to them about it and they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been looking into that. That's interesting. Especially even just like knowing that NASA's full of shit. A lot of people, even if they think the Earth's a globe, they know NASA's full of shit. So yeah,
I
it'd be
honestly,
interesting to see how it folds out.
I really think about humanity in general. I think most humanity just is in their own mind worried about their own selves, right? Like, I really wonder, like, how things might actually, like, what would really change if it came out that the Earth, that if it was revealed that in fact the Earth is flat. Like, I really wonder, like, if humanity in general would even care. You know what I mean? I mean, it seems like people see things right in front of their face and they don't even react. Let alone a something that doesn't even directly impact them, like immediately, that they can see or think of. I think a lot
I
of
think
people
that's
would
by
still
design.
just, yeah.
I think that's the way that they have it, set out. The way that the education system, the way that the media industry, the movie, the music industry basically shapes people's minds. The education system, especially, it teaches people just to obey, not necessarily to think critically. Basically, memorize and regurgitate information that you get told is true.
Right.
I
I
think,
think that's how people would act if they if it was revealed something so huge that the shape of the Earth was not round and flat. I think it would be a really, like, a kind of like a firework would shoot up in the air and kind of hit and fizzle out. I don't think there would be a reaction that it would deserve in some sense. You know what I mean?
yeah, maybe. But over time, I think things would change.
We would just have a
And
national holiday is all that would change, right? It would be like, today's Flat Earth Day, like when we realized that the Earth is flat. That would be like, I see. I'm just trying to picture, like how people would actually handle learning the truth. And I don't, gosh, it's like humanity just proves that humanity just proves over and over again that a lot of the time truth is not what's most important, is it? It's their own selfish desires of comfort and greed to some perspective. You know what I mean?
yeah, well, a lot of people are basically, the globe's almost like a religion to a lot of people. I mean, it's almost like someone finding out that, like a hardcore Christian finding out that the Bible was all incorrect and Jesus never existed or something like that. It's people have meltdowns. We see people have crazy meltdowns every day over this topic. You're not like that. A lot of people have their ego in check. A lot of people aren't married to the globe, right? You don't sound like you're married to the globe. But some people come in here and they're defending it like we're attacking their wife or something like that. They're just so passionately, it's like you're trying to tell them that Jesus doesn't exist or something like that. It's crazy some of the way people react to this. And some people will turn into full-on crazy stalkers and they'll try to find out where the flat earthers live and try to get them fired from their jobs and follow them around to all the different servers for years and years. There's stacks of people that do that.
No way.
Oh yeah, yep.
Seriously?
You know, we even like we get death threats, and we had a guy, a high level engineer called Brian Mullen. He made a series called Balls Out Physics, where he would go over all of the arguments on an extremely technical level from a engineering standpoint. And yeah, he had tons of people sending him death threats, and they found out where he works, and they contacted his engineering company, and and then his engineering company said, "Look, this is bad. Like you're gonna have to stop making content about flat Earth." And he ended up having to move state, and there's tons of situations like that. Like people, this topic makes people go freaking crazy for some reason.
I could see those that are like financially benefiting from that type of idea, like NASA directors sending people to stop the flat Earth people. But gosh, I couldn't just imagine an everyday individual allowing such conspiracies or whatever such topics to really be so heavy on their hearts. Wow.
Yeah, it's like an emotional investment, especially some people that are right into space and that kind of thing. They have an
Oh,
emotional attachment to the globe, and they'll do anything they can to try to defend it. It's kind of like a religion in a way. It's a faith-based system. You kind of this is kind of what the education system's done in the modern Western education system. They basically removed religion, right, and kind of tried replaced gods with themselves in a sense, all right, and they call it science, the body of science, etc. The astrophysicists, right? These people are like kind of like the deities, or the gods of the heliocentric model. And
right.
they teach people that you're here by accident. You're like a little tiny speck that's here by mistake on this little rock, and you're on a universal scale, you're like a tiny little speck, like a grain of sand on a beach. And you're insignificant, and you're on this rock for no reason, right? You just evolved from pond scum, and you're just flying nowhere for no reason at all. And then one day everything's going to end, right? One day the sun's going to blow up and everything will be dead, and you could die at any second from an asteroid. This is kind of what they teach people from a young age in the modern Western education system, most education systems. Whereas flat Earth isn't possible to be created from some big bang, right, where nothing exploded and created everything. It leads way to some kind of creator, right?
What? Tell me about that.
Well, you can't have this a creation like we have without a creator. So whatever that is, right?
Yeah, I agree. I
That's
would
not
say the same
something
with the
that.
globe, though, right? Or what? How do you decipher how
Well,
do you
that's
put
not what the
more?
main.
Uh
Well, okay, so sure, there's a lot of Christians that are globe earthers. Obviously, that's fine, but that's not what they're teaching in the mainstream education system. They're teaching people that we're just here by chance, by accident.
How does the flat Earth steer us away from that false theory of we're here by time plus matter plus chance?
Well, so the heliocentric model, it's all tied back to the Big Bang theory, evolution, right? It's all kind of tied in together, not from a creator, not from a, yeah. Probably some other people here that can explain the creation side of things better. I don't know if Jedi's around. I know he's good at explaining this, but yeah, the chances of everything existing the way they do, I don't think it's not possible to have happened through the current way that it gets taught in the education system, just from nothing exploding,
I see what you're
that created.
saying. You're
Yeah.
suggesting that the globe shape is like something that has more probability of being the random result of the Big Bang explosion. Is that what you're saying? That the
Yeah,
round
yeah,
shape of the
that we're
Earth,
just here by random chance.
but the
And that
round
type of
shape.
chance, well, if you have a look into the actual odds,
Uh-huh.
of an explosion happening and then creating everything that we have today over time, right? The odds are extremely low, like
I
basically
would say
impossible that
impossible.
yeah, it's like having a bomb blowing something up, and then all of a sudden there's like a Lamborghini
Right,
formed from the explosion or something like that.
right.
It's just, and then
I
they
agree
say we're
with
in
you.
the Goldilocks zone, and if you have a look at the odds of us being in this Goldilocks zone, it's like the craziest odds that we would exist in this heliocentric system. But basically, they don't teach that God was responsible for the Big Bang or evolution or anything like that in the mainstream education system. They're creating, a lot of these atheist type characters, and
Mm.
I'm not saying that I'm religious. I'm just saying that flat Earth tends to lead towards some type of creation, whatever that may be. Right? That's each
And that is
person's
why,
personal
because
speculation.
and you're saying that is because why? Because the flat Earth would truly have to be constructed to perform to allow life. Well, I don't know because
Well,
I
we
say
live in a we would have to okay, so we would live in a contained system, right? We know we live in a contained system,
we
right? That's
still
not able to
do we
just
still now live in a contained system, or if the
absolutely. The
world was
fact that we're
round? I mean,
no, no, you live in a space vacuum, right? You live in this
I see
giant
what you're saying.
infinite vacuum of space where you're on this little rock that's flying at 1.5 million miles per hour through this vast space vacuum that would kill you in a second if you were to enter it, which you're inside of, I guess, at the same time. Um, yeah, very different. I would describe the Earth system that we live in more like a terrarium, right? Like all of the ancient cultures all depicted the Earth system the same way, even though they didn't have contact with each other and that kind of thing. They all had the same general idea. It was a flat surface within a contained system, and yeah, it's extremely logical. I mean, if you want to have a terrarium, if you want to have a self-contained ecosystem, you need to have a container for starters. If you put that self-contained ecosystem inside a vacuum chamber and then take away the glass container or whatever it's made out of, everything's going to die pretty much instantly. But you can have a
Mhm.
self-contained ecosystem and you can never open it, right? And it will just look after itself. Some people have had these self-contained ecosystems going for 50, 60, 70 years without ever opening them, right? It's just they have all the natural cycles. It's just self-contained, like a little mini version of, a less complex mini version of what we seem to exist within. Yeah, I'll do just put like the depiction of some of the ancient cultures in the side chat there. You can see they have different depictions, but it's all along the same lines. A firmament or whatever you want to call it, right? A containment of some kind with the earth being flat with inside that containment. And it goes with natural law. What flat earthers would say is that to have gas pressure, you need to have a container, and that's also what the gas laws say. It's actually the definition of gas pressure. It's the necessary antecedent. If you need to have gas pressure, right, like a gas pressure system, you need to have a container of some kind. And you can't have a high pressure system like the air we're breathing right now adjacent to a vacuum without some type of physical containment that would have to be separating the high pressure from the extreme low pressure system. I'm not saying that there is a vacuum out there. I'm saying that you can't have a spinning ball that's covered in water and gas inside a vacuum without some type of physical containment. Now, obviously, they have explanations for all of these things. They'll just say, oh, gravity takes care of all of that. Don't worry about it. But there's no actual scientific experiments that prove that that's possible. They'll just tell you, oh, you can't test it on a smaller scale. You would need something the size of the Earth. So it's going to end up coming down to, okay, you're going to have to just trust that the model is correct. because you can't actually test it. Because when you test it on a small scale, nothing works.
Yeah, thank you for your,
Yeah, I could
your
notice
informative
myself
response.
starting to rant. So
But how do
yeah, it's
so do so should the
mm,
so the other planets, when we look at the other planets, are those can be globes because they are not designed to sustain life. They just are material or whatnot, right? Like matter. So the other planets that we see from our planet that appear to be globe, or the scientists say, look, these other planets are globes. Those could be globes because they're like just serving the purpose of just being shaped out of matter. But when it comes to the Earth, though, you would say that, well, those other planets might be globe, but this one is flat because it reveals the hand of creation and like the terrarium setup, like you said, right? I mean, just wondering about the other
yeah.
planets looking like globes, right?
Well, this like when we look up into the sky, we do see what the ancients called wandering stars. Okay, we see all of the stars moving east to west, and then we see the planets. And the ancients used to call the planets wandering stars because they take their own unique cycles in relation to the stars that all take the same sort of spiral in the sky. And then throughout our lifetimes, we get taught this big story from a young age about how space is a big giant vacuum, right? And these things we see in the sky are planets, and it's this one's called Mars, and it's so many millions of miles away, and it's made out of this and that, and maybe one day we could live there, and blah blah blah. We get fed this huge big story about the lights that we see in the sky. We can't really validate that's correct, right? That would fall, in my opinion, that would all fall under the category of pseudoscience, or a theory, like a theoretical construct or a concept or a mathematical model. So when you say other planets, I don't think that the Earth is a planet, for starters, and we're not in the heliocentric space vacuum. But it's perfectly normal for you to ask that question because we grow up thinking that we're a planet floating around and the things that we see in the sky are like us or we're like them. And then you hear about flat Earth, and you all of a sudden you try to fit the flat Earth into this globe model, into this heliocentric model. So you just think of a flat planet. Well, we don't claim that the Earth's a flat planet. We claim that it's a completely different system, a completely different way of thinking about the place that we live. And you could probably think of the Earth more like the floor or the foundation of the system that we live in. And you could think of the known area of the Earth more like a big lake. Okay, you could have a giant lake, and you could have islands inside the lake, right, popping up out of the water. And on a grand scale, you could call those islands continents, right? The water is contained in the low spot in the land, and then the land masses are the bits that stick out of the lake. The water's flat, just like we experience in real life. And you can traverse from one place to the other. We could call one continent America and one Australia and blah blah blah. Right? Completely different way of thinking about the system that we live in. And we look up into the sky, which is the same direction for everyone, right? Everyone on the earth points up, that's up. And that's where we have the celestial, like the celestial realm, or whatever you want to call it. We have all of these stars and planets and the sun and the moon, and the sky behaves like a big giant clock, right? We use that to tell the time, to tell seasons, when to plant, all sorts of different things, and everything runs in cycles. Right? If you have a look at the patterns that everything takes, right? Everything takes these unique, amazing patterns, and everything resets back into the same position each year or each cycle, right? Like if you go out and you map one star up in the sky tonight, you could go out exactly 1 year from now at the exact same time, and that star will be back in the exact same spot. And that's been happening for all verifiable history. But on the globe, they tell us that We're flying through space in all of these different directions at like 1.5 million miles per hour, never to return to the same position, yet all of the stars repeat like clockwork in the sky. All of the planets keep doing their cycles, and we don't ever see a change. Now, the way they get away with that in the heliocentric model is by saying that they just push things so far away. They'll say, oh, it never changes because it's 60 billion light years away, blah, blah, blah. And that's the reason you never see the stars change. Or they'll tell you, oh, it does change, but over such huge amounts of time, you'll never notice any change in your lifetime. So I don't know, the more you look into it, the more the flat earth sort of starts to make sense, and the more cuckoo, delusional the globe model starts to see. I mean, they tell us all sorts of crazy shit, right? They'll tell you that, oh, it rains diamonds in space. It rains diamonds on Uranus. It rains diamonds on Neptune. Oh, there's an exoplanet 60 billion light years away where it rains glass, sideways glass rain. All this crazy stuff, and people just lap it up.
So like when you see I'm wondering about I'm worried about, I guess, planets different outside of our Earth here. Like when you see them, when someone who is convinced of, I don't know how to put it respectfully, but when someone understands that the Earth is flat, do they look at the moon and say, it appears a globe, but we don't know for sure, that could also be flat? Or when we see images of Saturn and we see Saturn appearing as a globe, right? Do you say, well, that's NASA's image, but truly it could also be flat? Or are the round planets that we see just serving a different purpose?
Well,
And you agree that the round.
it could be something completely out of our comprehension, out of our knowledge. We don't know exactly what they are, how big they are, how far away are they, what they're made of, and what medium they're in. So we don't know that for sure. And I think most flat earthers would argue that unless we can physically check something, right, unless we can empirically validate what it is, right, then we just see what we see. And sure, we can agree that the moon looks like, we see half a sphere. So we can assume that probably there's another side to that. That's what it looks like the moon is. But that has no relation, right? Like to the Earth, right? The Earth has no characteristics that the moon has whatsoever. That's kind of like going out into the forest and seeing, oh, I see trees everywhere. My dog must be a tree as well. It's like, oh, what? It doesn't have any characteristics that the trees have. So why would we assume that just because you can see something else off in the distance, therefore what you're standing on must be that? Now, I get the logic. It's just because what we're being brought up believing, this heliocentric model. They've taught us our whole life that you're also one of those little lights that you can see in the sky. You're also on that, But we can't. When we test the Earth, it doesn't check out that that's what the Earth is. Right? When we measure over huge distances, we don't detect any curvature, and that curvature would have to be there if the Earth's a globe. And we've got just endless amounts of tests now, right? Using high-powered laser beams, infrared photography, all sorts of different methods where we're testing for the curvature. We can't find any. Right? These are all documented. So whatever we are is completely different than the mysteries of the celestial realm up in the sky, whatever you want to call it, space.
Mm-hmm.
But look, have a look at this in the side chat. Like, have a look at this little. It's just a GIF to illustrate how you can't really tell what shape something is by looking at it. So when you first look at this, it looks like 4 spheres. But it's not until this person actually checks each of them to check what they are. It's like, okay, the first one's not a sphere. It's actually half a sphere. The second one's flat. The third one's a bowl.
I know what you
Even
mean.
though it looked, yeah. So I mean, sometimes there are more options than what we think, and then
So
there could be.
it sounds like the
Yeah.
evidence you sorry, Pickled. It sounds like the evidence that you use to push against round Earth theory is the same evidence that they will use to push back against you in some perspective. So it's like a seesaw of information, round with theories, flat with theories.
No. This is
No?
the difference. Nope. No. So everyone experiences the Earth as flat and stationary. That's kind of like the base reality that we all experience. Now they tell us that we're so small and the Earth's so big. That's why we don't see any curvature. Okay. So what flat earthers started doing was they started going and testing for the curvature. It's like, okay, if the Earth is a globe, then we can go to a 20-mile lake, and over that
I've
20-mile
heard
distance,
I've heard the theories in this channel before. It goes like loses my interest, but I don't know. Maybe somebody else wants to hear those testings.
well, yeah, I don't have to show you the testing. I can just explain the logic behind it, right? So basically, if the Earth's a globe, it has to have a certain amount of curvature. If we can consistently test it and that curvature isn't there, right, then it can't be a globe. And a lot of people think, oh, yeah, well, the globe earthers have all of the tests as well that counter your tests. No, they don't. They actually don't. And if you think they do, go look for them. And that's when you'll start to it'll start to click. You'll be like, oh, damn. Their tests, if you look up, oh, who first measured the globe? It'll come up with an ancient Greek guy from 300 years before Jesus' time called Eratosthenes, and they'll say, oh, Eratosthenes was the first person to measure the curvature of the globe. No, he didn't do shit, right? He didn't measure anything. I mean, he measured the length of a shadow. He already made the assumption that the Earth's a globe. He did some spherical mathematics, and he just basically just made assumptions and then did calculations based off those assumptions. You'll find that with a lot of the tests for the globe. It's just based off assumptions. If you look at the
What would it
history
take?
of the globe, if you look into the history of the globe, that's when it really starts to make sense, in my opinion. It's not like some people went out one day and started doing measurements and they're like, damn, we've been wrong. All the ancient cultures were wrong for thousands of years. It's actually a globe. We tested it and we found the curvature. That never happened. Right? If you look into how the actual globe came to become a thing, you'll be extremely disappointed if you're a globe earther about how the globe became the globe. That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
So what would it take, Pickled, for you to one day say, I'm not trying to convince one way or the other, or really does my mind pursue that knowledge, to be honest with you, at this point in my life, not because it's irrelevant, but because, my life is currently impacted by just different things right now. Maybe that will change over time. But for you particular, Pickle, like what would convince you that to where you would say, oh, you know what, I was wrong. The Earth is in fact a globe. I mean, would you need a physical trip to outer space with time to watch with your own eyes the planet spinning, revealing its shape, or
No, super
would
simple.
some? Hmm.
Yeah, just validation that the surface of the water is curving at the rate that it should be curving if the Earth's a globe. It's super simple. I mean,
the
prove to me
the
that
water.
over
It's about the
yeah.
water, right? Right.
Well, this is what they tell us. 73% of the surface of the globe is covered in water. And that if you have a 10-mile distance over the surface of that water, there would have to be 66 feet of curvature over that distance.
So
Right? So
what if you got
just
on a
prove that there
spaceship?
is.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. What if you understanding that the Earth is flat, or like you say, and what if you got on a rocket right now and went to outer space, got some distance, and was able to look back on the Earth? Would that
Yeah.
give you any information to
Well, if in
decipher
that
or no?
hypothetical, yeah, in that hypothetical scenario, sure, of course, yeah, that would prove it. But I don't think that that's ever going to happen, and I don't think that you can go to space as the type of space that we've been taught, like the vacuum of space.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go there. I don't think that that's going to happen. If that happens, cool. But I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. But it wouldn't be much easier just to find that 66 foot of curvature over 10 miles. I mean, it's kind of like if
But the
someone
scientists,
if
they'll go to the
someone tells me
grave
that they're
believing
6 foot
that.
tall, and all
Yeah.
these people keep telling me Johnny's 6 foot tall, and I read about it, and I read about this Johnny guy being 6 foot tall, and I hear all these stories about what he can do because he's 6 foot, and then I just go and measure Johnny, and he's like 4'7". I'm like, oh shit, right? And they're like, oh, but what if you went to space and saw Johnny from space? It's like, well, no, we can access Johnny right here and just measure him, and he's 4'7". So all the bullshit about him being 6 foot tall is just bullshit. It's the same kind of thing.
So
I mean, we've gone out and measured it using high-powered lasers, right? We've had PhDs, engineers, huge amounts of money poured into these extremely powerful laser beams that people are shooting over huge distances across the surface of water. We had people doing infrared photography from planes, seeing things that should be hidden by miles of curvature. I mean, there's a huge accumulation now to the point where it would take a lot, right, for someone to be able to, they would have to refute all of these measurements that are being done, right? And then they would have to go out and they would have to do an equal amount, if not more, measurements showing that it's consistently curving, the water is curving.
I mean,
But
why
that's
the
not
why
going to
won't the
happen.
science? Why if the round if the you're saying the curvature does not reveal itself through testing, then why? I mean, anybody can just understand
Yeah.
that, right, and do the test themselves. What? Why are scientists? Why are scientists who are unable to prove the curvature not debunking scientists who say they can test the curvature?
Oh, I mean, we've had scientists go out and become flat earthers when trying to debunk flat Earth. But a lot of people think that, a lot of people don't have access to the flat Earth information because of the way that the censorship in the media works. Most people think flat earthers claim a flat disk floating around in space and think all of these crazy conspiracy theories. And most of these scientists have never gone out and actually questioned or checked the Earth themselves. I mean, we talk to tons of scientists, we talk to physicists, we talk to satellite engineers, aerospace engineers. Tons of people come through talking to us about this. A lot of them, we have to teach all of the basic arguments to them about flat Earth. And a lot of their arguments is just memorization and regurgitation, right? They never questioned when they were at university getting their master's degree or whatever they were getting. They never questioned the core fundamentals or the core variables in their textbooks. It's not like they're in their second year of whatever degree they're doing and they're like, well, how do we know that the radius value is actually correct? They don't do that. So yeah, a lot of them are ignorant to these particular questions. And most people, yeah, we encourage anyone, any scientist can go out and actually test the surface of the Earth, right? It's not really a field of science, to be honest, right? There's not like some degree in science that you can get where you're going to have to go out and test the surface of the Earth for curvature. It's already assumed as factual. So what we do is we hold their feet to the fire. We say, okay, can you, like, you're very good at repeating the explanations from the textbooks. Okay, but can you validate that explanation actually matches with reality? And that's where they fall apart. Right? If they're very good at regurgitating the model. Okay, it's like, okay, now we want to test that the model matches reality. So who gave you your knowledge of the model? Like, who proved it to you? And then most of the time they're like, oh, that's just something we know, or someone else did it. Someone else must have done that. But we do have like Dr. John D, right? He's a PhD in spectrophotometry. And he went out to try to debunk flat Earth. He took a bunch of his lab equipment, laser beams, different spectrums of laser beams, infrared cameras, and he started doing long distance observations, long distance laser tests. And he was kind of forced to become a flat earther in that process because he couldn't find the curvature. And he's been doing long distance observations and laser tests for years now. and he documents them all and shows people. It's like, hey, look, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. This is some high-end equipment, and look at my work. Right? There's no curvature over these huge distances. But it's been highly censored, right? Like I said, since 2016 up until now, it's been swept under the rug in a big way. But the information's getting out there, right? There's shitloads of flat earthers now. But yeah, like you said, a lot of the people are just they just believe whatever they see on the TV. It's also a tactic that they've used to make it extremely unpopular socially to mention flat Earth or to consider flat Earth. They've made it one of those things where they've used that tactic that, you should be mocked and ridiculed if you go against the mainstream consensus.
So just going to plug our home server real quick. I posted about 20 to 30, maybe 30 plus citations that I had. I was going for 50, but I have about 30 that I shared regarding geodesy and GPS satellite technology. These citations basically describe how accuracy is improved when you dispense of geodetic spherical coordinates and use an entirely flat surface instead, where the surface normal is not curving around a ball, where the surface normal is perfectly orthogonal. It's the horizontal reference plane that you use as a standard of measure to build, to land airplanes, to target. Why is that? Why is accuracy improved when you go with a completely different topological premise? Why not ask for a further refinement with higher fidelity of the current topological surface? No, they don't ask for that. They don't ask for a truer, they don't ask for a more precise version of what they already have. They actually do ask for a truer representation of what actually exists. That's what's going on here. And so you'll find easily 30 new reference citations from these fields, from geodetic surveying and normal surveying, as well as from GPS experts, people who research this crap for a living. They're all there. GPS technology is improved. The accuracy is improved with a network of ground towers that constitute the CORS network. There are 1,300 plus all over the world ground towers that are used supposedly in conjunction with the self-orbiting space junk called satellites. Without that enrichment of the data at the ground level, they say that modern GPS technology would only be as accurate as the Loran system from World War II. Isn't that a coincidence? So something like 60 feet maybe, or 60-meter precision. Yeah, that's still like a length or width of a house. So isn't that also about what the civilian band of GPS was degraded to in order to release to the masses? Coincidentally, yeah, because for a while GPS was bifurcated. They had two segments: the civilian and the restricted segment, restricted for military use. The civilian segment had a purposefully degraded signal that could not give you a precise location, but is precise enough for, people to buy TomToms and Garmins and drive around with them. Many of us did. And then I think at some point they released whatever restriction they said was imposed on it. But I think with that restriction, your GPS data was coincidentally as accurate or inaccurate, depending on your point of view, as the Loran system, the ground-based tower network that was used for navigation much in the same way. I just find that fascinating. And that also, coincidentally, they say that the differential method of GPS, differential in that they use an augmented system of ground towers, like the CORS network, that by integrating this technology, fusing it into the regular GPS system, that they can improve the accuracy of GPS by about the same margin as the unrestricted versus restricted, which is by the same margin as the Loran system is with modern GPS. I find all of these coincidences to be entirely fascinating.
Well, I remember when Garmin first came out, I went hunting I bought one. It was a real cheap one. It was a Garmin though. I bought one when I went hunting, and I would literally lose signal. It would give me an estimate where I was, but I would lose signal if I was down in a valley.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty
But it,
fickle.
but it would plot you out to where it thought you were from the last time it had a signal, So I mean, it was somewhat accurate, but yeah, you'd lose signal if you were down in a gully.
Right. So these satellites have to be within view, like line of sight view. Um, and they're shooting high frequency, like what, 1.2 gigahertz or something. So you can't have a lot in the way, tree branches and twigs and stuff. Um, yeah, and they have to be a respectable elevation above. And it's interesting. I mean, when you first initialize your GPS, it could take like 20 minutes or something for your GPS to crack that nut. But then after that, it doesn't really need to reinitialize unless I guess it's been off for a while, or you lose data or something. But there's so many people have so many different stories of what that entails. But what it actually entails is GPS doesn't only work with pseudo ranging like people believe. It's not just the timing signal packets whatsoever. There's a lot more to it. When you do that initial loadout, that initialization of your GPS, where it takes like 20 minutes. It's not just like acquiring satellites. What's happening is you're getting transmitted to your receiver an ephemeris and an almanac. And this ephemeris has within it tables and tables and tables, timetables of where the GPS satellites should be in the future. Isn't that interesting? Well, knowing that, I mean, you can you can process the signals for any coordinate reference system. Yeah. So that's why it's taken so long, because your receiver's basically downloading ephemeris and almanac, like astronomical almanac data, and it's doing it at like 150 baud. So that's why it takes 20 minutes to get all that long message text file. But once it has it, man, now your GPS receiver knows where it knows where those satellites are at any point in time into the future, into a fairly far ahead future. But how many people actually know this? Like, how many people coming in here saying, well, but I know exactly GPS proves the globe. How many people actually know this is happening in the receiver? I mean, I don't think those people do. And this is such a crucial, critical part. GPS will not work if your receiver doesn't get and process that ephemeris and almanac data. Now, after that, I mean, you can have the pseudo-ranging argument. That's fine. You can keep it. But you know what this is analogous to, folks? I'll tell you what this is analogous to. This is analogous to the inertial navigation system discussion, INS, with the Air Data Inertial Reference Unit, the ADARU, the 777. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about, that flight with the pitch data that everyone talks about. I'll tell you why this is analogous to that. Because the Air Data Inertial Reference Unit, which is the aircraft system, it has 3 ring laser gyros or fiber optic gyros and 3 accelerometers. And it's strapped to the fuselage, and it's called a strap down system. That system can't operate at all, will not work unless the operator, be it a pilot or technician, punches in latitude and longitude and selects WGS 84. Oh, that's right. Just like the GPS won't let you think you're on a globe unless it first processes a globe-based ephemeris, nautical almanac. Oh, and just like the airplane, the aircraft doesn't know that you're on a globe unless you first tell it it's on a globe, because you got to punch in latitude and longitude, which are spherical coordinates. And it's already got WGS 84 software loaded in, or you can load it in. Yeah. So you got to tell it that it's on a globe, which is a crucial first step before you get the globe out of it. Oh, well, so what else does that happen with? Oh, let me think. Oh, how about the entire field of geodetic surveying? Right? So you can select your globe first, and you can pick from any of them you want. NAD 27, WGS 84, whatever the case may be, some terrestrial reference frame. You pick one of those. You can do that first, and then you go out and you do your flat measurement survey with your theodolite, and then you take your measurements and you can bend them to your WGS84. But you know what? You might actually be better off doing it on the fly. And that's actually what a lot of surveyors used to do, like in the 1920s. They would do it on the fly. They'd measure and then bend, and then measure and bend, and measure and bend. Or they'd actually measure, throw out, measure, bend, throw out, measure, bend some more, bend again, throw out and bend, and then measure and bend, and then throw out, and then measure, bend, and keep. And then they move on to the next one. And measure, bend, throw out, measure, throw out, measure, throw out, measure, bend, throw out, measure, bend, keep. And then they move on to the next. And eventually they get a globe. Well, that same process happens much more incrementally at lightning fast speed due to computers inside of Boeing 777 and inside of your GPS receiver that's loaded on a Boeing 777. That's right. Your globe comes first. Your GPS receiver, before it even works and can tell you live on a globe or any other system you want, really, first has to get that ephemeris data. And that ephemeris is done, and that almanac is done basically treating Earth as center point and stuff going around it in 3D. You better believe it. It's not some flat Earth coordinate system. It's actually independent of that. It is both observer-centric and geocentric. And because that itself is a reference frame, the coordinate system that you apply to it, or is arbitrary, is the reference frame itself. So when you hear us say things like coordinate systems are arbitrary, we're saying basically it's as arbitrary as a reference frame that you might apply to it. Arbitrary in that there might be better ones that you can pick that will tell your story better. But no, man, screw all that. I'm not trying to calculate distances in a coordinate reference frame. I'm trying to measure shit. I'm trying to measure reality. So how do I know that this arbitrary coordinate reference system does not match reality? And then how do I develop one that does? Well, if I have a coordinate reference system that tells me the distance between point A and B is 60 miles, and I go out and I measure point A to B, not using a map, but doing an actual measurement, and it comes to 60 miles, I'll be like, okay, that part of the map is correct. What else do I have to check on the map? Right? So if you tell me that the coordinate reference system that I'm using from point A to B is 60 miles and it's also curving, and over those 60 miles, it's going to be dipping down, I don't know how deep that goes. 8 inches per mile squared approximate. Yeah. Okay. Go crunch those numbers, post it in the chat. But if you're telling me that coordinate reference system from A to B is also curving, it's not enough for me to just, go out and like measure like with the measuring wheel and roll it over a curving surface. Right? Or over a flat surface, and then how would you tell the difference? No, you're going to need more than that. So you're going to need to measure in 3 dimensions. All right, how many dimensions does your measuring wheel measure in? It measures lines. And then I guess it doesn't have a mechanism to know if you turn it. So it's really 1 dimension. So no, you're going to need more than something that measures things in 1 dimension. You're going to need combination of things, but you're going to need all 3 dimensions for this. So in 3 dimensions, you don't measure any curve. In reality, you know that the coordinate reference system that you're using that has curve in it is not real. I'm sorry, does someone have a
Greetings.
potato mic?
Is it
That was
me?
Osho. Yeah, that's better. We can hear you better now.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
Did it sound like I was far away?
Yeah.
Did you have a comment about what Yoder was saying?
I actually just came in, so I don't know what you guys were talking about.
Well, I was kind of wrapping it up, so that's fine too.
Okay. I guess what was the first thing that made you believe that the Earth is not, round?
I would say examining the evidence that people brought forth that it was a globe.
Okay.
I started losing hope in it.
What do you think about like magnetic field? Do you think we have a magnetic field?
Yeah, we do. They claim
Okay,
they've
so
measured it in Teslas. I forgot how much. It's not much.
a compass wouldn't work if the Earth wasn't a ball, right?
Well, I don't know if this is analogous, but you can hold up a lodestone,
Oh,
and which is magnetic rock, and you can hold up a compass, and you can hold up a ball compass to it, and you can make a ball compass orbit the lodestone that you're holding by just twirling them around with your hands, and the ball compass will point towards the lodestone.
How would a compass even work on a ball? That doesn't make any sense. Think about it.
Oh yeah, I know. In this case, it's pointing to like a, a surface feature of the lodestone instead of like, they say Earth has like some. Well, then again, I mean, the whole lodestone itself is aligned.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, how is Earth aligned? Look at the breakdown of the magnetic field south of the equator. I mean, it just gets so incoherent. So how can they say that it's aligned? It's got like fields are aligned. Aligned with what? How come there's a third dip pole? People are aware of like a North Pole and a South Pole, and they align them mentally with the celestial North and celestial South. But people don't know about the third South Pole, which is right now off the southwest coast of Australia, south of like Diego Garcia. Yeah, that's right. You have two South Poles. What now? And yeah, there are field lines connecting them. And
Hey,
one of them
Yoder, what is
supposedly stays fixed and the other wanders. What's up?
that lodestone you were talking about?
Yeah.
I didn't quite hear that. Is that like a natural rock? Is it
Yeah, like,
magnetic or?
yeah, I think so. I think it's like magnetite or something. And it's just magnetized rock. You can hold up a piece of natural rock. It's magnetized, and you can take a compass. And if the compass, I guess, would have to be weighted in a fluid, or unweighted. I mean, the compass would point. I guess if you could like submerge it in a ball, it would point. The charged tip would point at the lodestone, aligning with the
Oh,
fields.
right,
The
right.
fields are suspended in 3D.
Yeah, I live way up north, Minnesota area, and we have a lot of iron ore in our rock up here,
Okay.
and compasses are very difficult to use, especially
Yeah.
on the Iron Range.
And that reminds me of stories of these like surveyors. And when surveying got really popular, like in the 1700s, they, you had guys bringing out with them with their theodolites. They're bringing out freaking pendulums, swinging balls from strings, and bringing out of pendulums and dowsing rods and um, and and also fixed plumb lines. And you'd have like the surveyor, right? He'd be with his theodolite, like doing real civil engineering work. He's up there trying to get a direct line of sight to these targets, maybe doing a little bit of refraction calculation, some trigonometry, and he's doing this alignment. He's taking deep breaths and he's checking his level. He's checking his almanac, stars, noting the time. He's probably got like 10 clocks. And then you got these jabronis behind him, right? They got one plumb line that's hanging still and one doofus with a notebook staring at it. They got another guy looking to plumb line that's swinging back and forth. Another doofus with a notebook that's got a stopwatch and he's timing it. And then you got a guy with like dowsing rods walking around the field looking for water. And we're supposed to take all of these seriously except the dowsing rods. I think in about 10 years, maybe 20 years, we're going to throw out the pendulums too. Because you know what they were trying to do with the pendulums? They were trying to determine how much the Earth was a globe. Yeah, you don't believe me? You see, what they thought they were doing with the fixed pendulum, call it a plumb line, is they're measuring what they thought was the vector of the equipotential of gravity. And then by swinging the plumb line, they were trying to time how much that pendulum slowed down and whether or not it slowed down in accordance with a fixed constant. So now you got a vector and I got a strength of a field. So you got these got the ability to ascertain what they thought was the strength and direction of gravity. They try to line this up with with their astronomy readings. So you had an astrologer there too, and the kind of things that they would do is they would see if the plumb lines that they were hanging that were perfectly still, if they could get a reading of a star that's supposed to be at a specific point in time, a specific point in place relative to the plumb line that they threw up, that they're studying, seeing how vertical it is, that the alignment of the star and the coincident of the plumb line that they hung would have to be pinpointed to a location on a globe. And in some cases, many cases actually, the plumb line being strung up at its vertical would not coincide where a particular star would have to be at its apportioned time and place, and it would be off a little bit. And it'd be confounding because maybe in the previous days in this location or at other locations, at other points, um, it was fine. So they introduce warps in the gravity field between the observer and the star somewhere. And these warps can be local, or you could also be looking through a warp that's further down, 100 miles away. But it's warping the starlight causing the apparent time and location of the star where they thought it's supposed to be if Earth is a globe relative to the vertical that they threw up to study. That it doesn't align. If it doesn't align, that means gravity must be pulling the starlight, which means that this vertical plumb line is actually plumb, guys. It actually totally is plumb, but the plumb line is curving in space-time. And so they warp, no kidding, they warp the starlight, and now they get a globe. And that's without using refraction. They were doing gravity warping shit like this in the 1800s. They discovered in the Himalayas that the amount they thought gravity should be warping starlight, which is supposed to be super high because the Himalayas are these big mountains, that it actually didn't warp the starlight much, if at all. I'm like, well, that's crazy. These mountains must only be surface deep, I guess. All that extra dense mass must only stop right here at the ground floor. All that extra dense mountainous rock doesn't exist further down, so that's why it's not warping the starlight gravity here. So just when they thought they had everything figured out, reality threw them a loop. So now they have to come up with their own exception for the Himalayan region. And this isn't the only place they do this in. They do this at the equator region, and they do this up near the poles. They also have actually a graduated correction between the equatorial region and the pole, the North Pole. Right? You know what they call that today? They call that the equatorial bulge. When really the equatorial bulge may be some kind of anomalous bulge in the way starlight manifests in the equatorial region in the sky.
Say that
There's a
again,
big,
would you?
yeah, the equatorial bulge is based off of gravimetric readings, which is what I was describing earlier. Okay, so the 69-to-1 rule that people talk about is, even within the globe paradigm, only a rule of thumb. It's non-uniform and it changes depending where you are on Earth. They claim a little bit, and this is seen with the equatorial bulge, because the idea is if you are walking around a globe that has more dramatic curvature, the relationship between the ground you cover and the angle of the star in the sky is going to be different. If the curve is more dramatic, then the angle changes more dramatically. So if you're rounding a bulging equator, you're going to get a change in the rate of change that the angle of the star moves relative to the amount of distance that you cover. And then they claim that it's relatively uniform north of the tropics. But then as you get north of 60 degrees, it starts to flatten out. And the more distance you travel, the less that angular incline of Polaris goes. So you have a changing rate of change of declination and inclination of stars relative to the distance you travel on Earth. This is picked up by star observations, and they call this today gravimetry. And they actually test the density of things in boxes. I know. I know. I don't know how much correlation there is in modern gravimetry by testing the density of things in boxes at different elevations is with the warping of starlight that they attributed to gravity back as so far as like the 1730s, no joke. But it all kind of stems from the same idea. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if the boxes, like if the data that they acquire from those black boxes lines up with the data that was acquired by these pendulum swingers. But in the like 1730s, I think it was mid 1700s. Nevertheless, there was that big debate between the British and the French kings, where the French king thought the Earth was egg-shaped, which is prolate, and the English king thought the Earth was, as a globe was oblate, was flattened at the poles instead of stretched like an egg. And they had this big debate, and so they each hired, their respective surveying teams and deployed one to the equator and one in Peru, and then one to Lapland, way up north. And they did their whole angle measurement distance thing. And this is way back then to see if Newton was right, from the English perspective. And that's when they supposedly determined that Earth was an oblate spheroid because of the rate of change in relationship of the angles of the stars were different with regards to the distance covered in the north as it was in like France. And it was also different than it was in the tropics relative to like France. So yeah, they actually did claim that the starlight must have been bending, to account for things that are not uniformly behaving. Right. Another thing of non-uniform behavior is the proper motion of stars. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But the stars do their big star trails in the sky, but over much longer periods of time, they exhibit other behaviors, well, more or less. But there's some radical incidents of this, like I think Wolf 359 is one such star that has fast proper motion. Another one is like Barnard star. There are a few other stars out there like this that they know if they've cataloged that don't really act like stars. They act like, I don't know, comets or something. So they go with the stars, but not really with the stars, but more with the stars than without the stars. But they don't behave. And there's also the anomalous behavior above the horizon attributed to the atmosphere itself. Right. So you've got the idea that that the sun has already set, but you're still seeing it due to refraction. Oh, that's crap. But what you actually see is a flattening effect. The bottom of the sun, when it appears to be cut off on the horizon, it's not actually being physically cut off by some kind of terrain features in the distance, be it, on the body of water itself or, land or foliage or even distant cities. What's happening is it's actually going to appear to flatten out just above the horizon. And we see this with sunrise and sunset solar eclipses. So fascinating. You see the sun setting and the sun's eclipse. So you're seeing a ring of fire starting to set, and the bottom of the ring flattens out. And the top of the ring, the top remains arched, but then the top of the arch collapses into a flat bottom, and the whole thing turns into a line, and the line ends up shrinking in width from left to right, and then it disappears. The moon does the same thing. There's a moon flattening effect that happens as well. And the flattening effect is normal. So when you see a normal sunset, and if there's nothing obstructing it, the bottom of the sun is actually not being cut off by some curvature of the earth. It's just being flattened out due to the thickness of the air and the light propagation through a narrow band. You're going to get some compounding effects of optical density from the observer site all the way to wherever the sun is. And so you got this ever increasing change of gradient.